Hello and welcome to another episode of Shh, Don't Tell My Mom. Today we are being joined by the visionary living coach Rico. Rico, could you tell us a little bit about what you do in this in the sexual liberation or like sexual freedom space? Or is that what you're up to right
Absolutely.
now? Hmm.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the many domains that I pride myself in um, conversating or carrying a conversation with people around. It's interesting because maybe 2 years ago I wrote a curriculum called Successful Awareness. So it's kind of like successful, but it's successful. It's a little play on words. And I actually, created it because I found that there was a lot of things in the sexual space that were very taboo, and so a lot of people weren't able to mature and grow in that domain of life, because again, if we don't talk about a specific domain, we won't learn anything in that domain either. So it actually, like, opening up conversation, learning, talking is the only way that we'll grow, learn, and illuminate any of the dark blind spots that we don't know are there, uh, so yeah, I'd say that that's kind of like where I can say that, shh, don't tell my mom.
Yeah.
Works for me. That's a funny show name, by the way. I love it. It's really hilarious.
Thank you. Well, it's a play. It's a play. For me, I'm not going to tell my mom that I'm doing this. This is a mask. This is like the thin veil of this thin mask that I wear for my parents, so that they can deal with me and not worry about me, right? Because it was something it's taboo. It's like, the drugged up hippies go and they go and have sex, and that's gonna ruin your life, kind of thing, and it's scary. It's a scary thing. It's been demonized, and I
Yeah.
and I'd like to be a force to uh, to break that taboo, to introduce it in a positive way, not like those. Yeah. Anyway, you go. You have something to add.
Yeah, well, I think that that's really brought me into the space of not just sexuality, but intimacy and romance and romantic connection, right?
Hmm.
I think that sexuality is really misunderstood, um, because primarily we learn how to interact with men and women first through the relationships that we have with our father and our mother. So like, what was the relationship like with your parents? What did you learn about relating to women with your mom? What did you learn about relating to men with your dad, right? Maybe mom or dad wasn't even exist in the picture. They didn't exist in your life as in your childhood. And so, like, then what did you learn? Or maybe you had a great relationship with them. What did you learn, right? After learning the initial relationship tactics through the parenting, I think that then we learn through social or cultural traditions or norms, values, right? So what do we see in culture? Us being in the United States, what does the American culture look at sex like? And I think that we over sexualize everything in order to sell stuff, right? Like, here's a Gillette commercial. Let's put a hot woman on there, even though it's for a man's armpit. Like, what in the world? You know, you go to different countries like Europe, and they have a whole different perspective or cultural norm around how they approach or talk about or address sexuality. So after parents and then after cultural norms, we then also pick up belief systems around sexuality and intimacy from our own experiences. So what was your first time exploring sexuality like? Was it a good experience that then you sought it out? Or maybe it was a bad experience that then you avoided it. And maybe for some, it wasn't even a choice. The choice was taken away from them, and that alone is a heavy conversation. But then through that trauma, how do we then even learn to accept love or intimacy with another person? So there's a lot of layers, I think, that goes into sexuality, and it's not simply about the act of sex. I think that it is about relating. Sexuality is just one form of relating. It's one form of relationship. And then not only that, but there's also, like, you go deeper into the types of relationships. I think that the most common type that we see globally is monogamy. And monogamy isn't the only type of relationship that exists, though. There's polygamy, there's polyamory, there's all these different labels that you can kind of put, and they all have their own I guess rules, or like the partners that are in play with each other are going to set up their own boundaries so that they could be safe within that I guess label of relationship type.
Hmm.
um, and so I think that when people are very conditioned, let's say around monogamy, then when the first time that they see a swinger, or the first time that they see a triad or whatever, what have you, I think that it might actually like kind of poke at their ego a little bit. Like they don't even know how to act, respond, or feel about it. So yeah, that's kind of like my focus and conversation today.
Yeah. There are all different kinds of relationships, as you said. And when someone says, you want to be in a relationship with me, each person has a different view of what a relationship looks like. And if you do not discuss that and create that connection and agreement with your partner or partners, that's when things sort of fall apart. And I think that even in that, like, you're like tricking someone into the relationship that you want, and then once you have someone who's adequately been deceived, you can start manipulating them into being the person that you want them to be. Well, they have deceived you and are manipulating you into the person that they want, or something like that, and like relationships go nuts. They like go crazy out there. And that has
What
a
kind
lot
of
to do.
relationships do you have?
I'm just saying,
I'm just kidding.
I see this all the time. What are you talking about? I'm sure you've seen many people walking through life
Well, what I
afraid of
think you're
discussing it.
addressing, yeah, what you're addressing really is the fact that there's not clear communication in most relationships, or the
Hmm.
average relationships. I think that effective communication builds a team, and in that team you have companionship, and in companionship, sex is one physical act that we bring to the relationship. So like, how do you want to relate to it? How do you want to explore it between us as
Hmm.
companions? And I think that when people don't discuss the boundaries or discuss their comforts or really take it to that level, then there becomes a lot of unspoken assumptions. So I'm
Hmm.
assuming the boundaries that come along with relationship when I say, do you want to be in relationship? And then my assumptions of the boundaries are not the same as your assumptions of the boundaries. And when our boundaries then get crossed because we don't have clear agreements in place, then there might become some resentment or some bitterness or some disconnection, some closed
Hmm.
off. And then that might even lead to secrets, and then secrecy would even lead to the inevitable destruction of the relationships.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that really has to do with the lack of support systems, and one of those things that is more of a typical question for me is, or like a typical thing to think about on this show is, do you have that relationship where you could talk to your parents or someone in your family about your sexual preferences and relationships? Are you creating these networks of people that you can talk to these relationships with? Um, because what I've found in my own life and currently right now, while I'm like being in this space of talking to people about this, that when
Mm,
I say that, I become like one of the only people that they can talk to about their relationship, and I'll be
right.
dumped on. I'll be given the opportunity to listen to all the things that they need to talk about. Um, do you have a strong support system around being able to talk about these taboo subjects?
Well, I don't know that I have a support system outside of my direct relationship necessarily. I do know that it always helps to have a community or a support group of some kind where you can have, similarities and conversations around the things that like we agree on and that we connect on. But I really like to bring just that open, clear communication to my own relationship.
Hmm.
So it's, hey, love, what's up today? How are you feeling? What can I give to you? What's missing in our relationship that you need from me? And even in the sexual domain, what is it that I can do for you? What is it that you want? What do you what do you want to get out of a session, let's say,
Hmm.
of us connecting in an intimate way and having a sexual connection, and so I think that just a clear and effective communication with your partner. Now, if you're, again, with multiple partners, like if it's not just one companion that you're kind of like having an agreement with, if you have multiple partners, even then, to still have that open and clear communication. I think that a lot of people might have fear around being honest because they are concerned with being judged. And I think that what that has to do with is that they have shame around their own freedom of self expression. So if I, let's say I'm a gay man and I love men and I find them very attractive, but I'm in a community or a culture that shuns that idea, then I might not share it. I might like hold it within me because of fear of judgment of other people. Meanwhile, I'm not living my full, true, authentic expression. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. It's just about clarity, about transparency, and it's also about scrubbing away the shame or any shame or guilt that you have around what you like and what you want and what you desire. It's simply about liking what you like and what you desire, but coming from from a place of honor. Like I can like what I like and be proud of who I am. Doesn't necessarily mean I got to go around flaunting my business and kind of telling everybody what I like and what I don't like, but to just stand confidently in my truth of like this is who I am, and it's not designed to hurt anyone.
Hmm.
To know that there is someone out there who reflects back to me what I enjoy, and together we can enjoy the same thing because it's great. You
Yeah,
know
well,
that.
if you're not being your authentic self,
Hmm.
then when another person that would really enjoy your authentic self comes along, you won't be able to express that authenticity to them, and then
Exactly.
and miss that opportunity. And I feel like that gives people the ability to say, "There's no one else like me out here," because
Right.
they have a mask on that never allows people to see your authentic self.
And it's perfect too to piggyback off of what you just said about like no one's like me. I think that it is human condition to kind of make myself separate from other people than it is to find the similarities. We go into the world where there's different countries and languages and religions and backgrounds and ethnicities. And I think that when we look at the world from that perspective, we're like, wow, look how much variety. I'm the only one. I'm alone. As me, who I am and what I like, it's
Hmm.
very like unique, and I'm alone. No one can understand me. But to the degree that we believe that and tell ourselves that, we will actually feel like a sense of isolation and ostracization, even if we're in a community of people that love me.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? It's actually about shifting the mind in order to start looking from a place of inclusion. Like, how are we all the same? Every human being has to eat, every human being has to breathe, every human being cries and laughs and gets angry, right?
Hmm.
So we have more in common than we think. It's about looking for the commonalities rather than looking for the reason why we're not.
Yeah, and that brings us to philosophy and
Yeah.
looking at your own personal philosophy. Do you have a philosophy that you go by that's written down, or that is like a known philosophy, like a Taoism or Stoicism, or something that someone could read a book on it, or read multiple books on that, or do you have a philosophy, a personal philosophy that you've taken and picked things from different sections of human, I don't know, philosophies?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't say that I follow one structured philosophy per se. I do like philosophy, period. I would say that I approach life with the Socratic method. So Socrates, one of the big philosophers who knew nothing and questioned everything. The Socratic method is really approaching life from the perspective of I know nothing, and I am consistently a learner of life. I think that a lot of human beings, it's very common for us to have an experience of life learn something from it, and then take that lesson and make it a blanket statement across all things. All men are that way, all women are that way, all relationships are that way. And to the degree that we blanket statement our truth on all of life, we're actually limiting the possibilities that exist in life. And so to be in the question of everything, like, is it really that way? Could it be different? If it was different, how would I want it to be? How would I want it to look? So, simply the Socratic method of being in the question of life. I think anything that can have us question things as opposed to being so set in the solid answer, truth, or reality that there's no other way. I think that's where growth is.
Yes, yes. I see that. I'm hearing it, and I'm also
Mm-hmm.
hearing when I am in conversing or in a relationship with someone who constantly is in the question. Do you get to get a lot of things done? It does a how does it affect your relationship when you do one thing and then uh, a new opportunity comes up where you make a new fresh decision, which doesn't make you seem consistent, but is this thing that comes up, and then you make a new fresh decision where the other person doesn't really have the opportunity to like start seeing patterns. I feel like I want to see a certain amount of consistency
I see
in
what you mean.
people's uh, view of me. I want to be consistent for those people, which also sometimes it conflicts in
What I
my own
what I think that
philosophy.
you're highlighting, I think you're highlighting identity right
Mm-hmm.
now, and that's a full discussion. We can go into a full-fledged philosophical discussion around identity, and you would come out of it the other side like, whoa, because there are definitely many layers, different parts, moving parts to identity. One is, how do I view myself? Being the only person in the entire world that knows 100% of my own experiential history, right? And then even my parents might know 50% of my story, but there was a good half of my life that I wasn't even with them. And I might have shared certain stories, but it's impossible to share 100% of every story with every single person, right? So on one hand, you have my identity, how I see myself. Then on the other hand, you have how others perceive me. So now, how others perceive me is a little more complex too, because they're going to filter my actions through their own experiences, right? So, for example, I could wake up one morning, invite you over to my house, and make you breakfast. And I invite two people over to my house and make breakfast, and I cook eggs and bacon and ham, and let's say one person that I invited over my house was Jewish and they don't eat
Mm-hmm.
pig, and the other person wasn't. So let's say they were Southern and they love pig, So the Southern person's perspective might be, look how nice and humble and what a gentleman. Like, he cooked breakfast, like this was great. That same action could be viewed by the other person like, wow, how rude. He doesn't like recognize that I have a dietary restriction and like didn't accommodate for that. You know what I mean? So the one same action in one perspective, my own perspective, is, oh, I'm giving. This is great. I see myself as a giving person. From the other perspective, it can be perceived however they filter it.
Mm-hmm.
So, based on their experiences of life, they could filter that same action as a good thing or as a bad thing or anywhere in between on that spectrum, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
And in like relationship or in being a person and who is interested in having sex with other people or like being a sexually active human being. Um, you might go and say hello to someone, and that hello could be like, this is an invitation, or that hello could be like, get away from me, you man. like this is like I've been in this situation before, or you buy somebody a drink and one person could really enjoy that drink and the other person can be very afraid of it.
Absolutely. Right. And
And
so
because of based on like their personal histories and experiences, and I
now,
think oop, you can go.
sorry, kind of broken up a little bit. Keep
Oh,
going.
okay. Um, so based around that and these identities, and it is there are a lot of moving parts, that to not assume, which is something I'm working on currently,
Hmm.
is something valuable in a relationship and in life in general, to not think that if you're going to be late, you're going to get the same treatment as if you were late the last time, and to strive to always be better is something else that we can work on in philosophy, like utilizing a philosophy to support your relationships, and
Right. And
especially.
to tie the identity conversation back to your original question, which was the consistency,
Mm,
right? I think that there is a core consistency of character. So, who I am, what values and principles I hold within me, and then that dictating my actions and the way that I show up in each situation, which is separate from a new decision, and or like that inconsistent decision, the kind of like anomaly, if you will.
mm,
But I also feel like the inconsistent decisions are necessary for our exploration. Some people, for example, my aunt, I remember one time clearly, my aunt, I made this, like, I forget what it was, like a peanut butter banana sandwich with like popcorn on it. I don't think that that's what it was, but it was something like outworldy, you know what I mean?
mm,
And I went to my aunt and I was like, "Hey, try it. It's really good." And she was like, "Nah, I don't like it." And I said, "Have you ever eaten it before?" And she goes, "No." And I was like, "Then how do you know you don't like it?" You know what I mean?
mm,
Like, the only way to know you don't like it for sure, beyond a doubt, is to actually experience it, to try it.
mm,
So I think that there's a lot of things that maybe we haven't tried, and not just sexually, but in all areas of life, that we haven't tried, but we have a preconception that we won't like it. And so we live out of our preconception versus the experience of trying it and saying I liked it or I didn't like it.
mm. Well, it's wonderful that you have a partner that you can discuss these things with, because I know for myself that I often go outside of my partnership to discuss um, my sexual identity, and my identity as a man who has relationships with
Right.
other people. Um, and that was really the crux, I think, of what we were talking about, where it's easy to go down a philosophical wormhole,
Yeah.
um, but that the strength of your support system, I believe, directly is in proportion with the strength of your relationships.
And
And
what's interesting is, when it comes to relationships and companionship, right? I find that when you are in a relationship or when you are connecting with someone, there's a reason. 'Cause have you ever met someone where it's just a complete turn off? It's just like, yeah, no.
mhm,
You could be a great person somewhere else, but I can just tell that our vibration together, negative. I don't want that.
yeah,
Um, but when it comes to like sexual arousal, there has to be something working, like biochemically working, that's connecting us.
mhm,
And so in that connection, typically friendship is actually one of the foundational parts of that relationship. So before, you go to sex, you have to have connection, and connection is truly like a friendship. And so if you have such a great friendship with your partner,
mhm,
then it should be easy, kind of like any of your other friends, to open up the conversation of my sexual identity. And so who am I, or what am I thinking? What am I putting in the way of really empowering that relationship with this person by simply
Mhm.
being transparent, honest, and open, and saying, hey, listen, like, no actions have been taken yet, but this is what's on my mind. What are your thoughts? And there's a possibility that they might say, I'm not interested in that.
Mhm.
And that's a possibility. And the other possibility is they say, cool, let's try it. So it is a 50-50 chance, but us being afraid of the no, I think, is what has us not go deeper into creating a powerful relationship and just taking the conversation directly to the source. And that's not to say that you don't have your support group. Like, if you do have a support group where you could be that transparent, open, and honest and discuss your sexual identity, fantastic. The discussion of my sexual identity allows me to grow and develop what I think my sexual identity is. But as I grow and
Mhm.
develop it and become more secure in it, now am I bringing it to my relationship, or am I simply going to fall out of the relationship to find someone that would be compatible with my newfound identity? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that I have a personal fear of disturbing or hurting the people that I'm close to, um, and which may be irrational or something that I'm working through currently, that caused me to talk to certain people about certain things and certain other people to discuss certain other things with, because they're further away from the the issue that I may have, and they can give
Right.
me a different perspective, and there's less to there, there's less opportunity to cause someone pain.
Yeah.
If I'm working on something myself, with like the love kitchen, or not the love kitchen, the mastery of love, where
Mm.
he talks about, you have trash and you carry it around with you. And when you get into a relationship with someone, you don't take your trash and put it in front of them, and they don't take their trash and put it in front of you and say, sort this shit out.
Right.
You get to sort it, like, there's a there's a desire for me to sort my own shit out without burdening another person with it. And I know that's different than asking for support, but sometimes those signals look very similar. Um,
I
anyways,
get
that
that. And
yeah.
and and I think that's why there is a community, like, of people that can share that full self-expression, or what they might think other people might think is weird,
Mhm,
but then they come together and feel a sense of belonging because they get, wow, I'm not weird. Look at all these people that can share the same thing with me.
mhm.
Hmm.
So we talked about philosophy, we talked about communication, and another thing that I find to be evident is spirituality and the connection between relationships and deepening yourself, deepening the relationship, and having this sexual relationship, and the connection between that and spirituality. Do you see that in your own relationship?
Yeah, there's actually a meditation that I want to write, and integrate into a workshop, an experiential workshop, where I highlight the conversation around reincarnation. And the point is not to have anybody believe that reincarnation is real, because as a philosopher, I wouldn't know if it's real or not, right? I don't know. I'm just curious. It's an interesting thought. But imagine if it was real. Imagine if reincarnation was a thing. But also know that time is not linear the way that we think it is. That's just the experience of our third dimension right now. But what if time was almost like a circle, right? So what if when I die as Rico, I come back as Alex? Same lifetime, and I even meet me. Like, we're on this webinar together. And so it would make, like, I'm you in another life, if that makes sense, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But now if you were every single other human being in another life, like, when you die, you're destined to come back and be born and live the life of this person, of this human being. And so what I think that if I can land that idea or that concept powerfully, that
Mhm.
there might just be less abuse, less rape, um, less emotional and sexual abuse. Because if everyone could get that, wow, if this was me in another life, if I was reincarnated to be here now, how am I treating myself?
Mhm.
How am I in relationship with myself? It's no longer an external force outside of me that I don't care about and that I can disconnect from. It is me. And if it is me, how would I want to be treated? And there goes the philosophy that's actually in like all religions: do unto others as you'd like to be treated, type thing. You can
Mhm.
find that in Taoism, Buddhism, Christianity, Catholicism, like all of it.
Mhm.
And so that's a very common understanding. And I think that to come from that perspective of like, this is me in another life, how would I like to be treated, and to just see all human beings that way, I think that it empowers any relationship, not just the sexual ones.
Oh, yeah, and I'm not just bringing up sexual relationships, but
Yeah, yeah.
your own philosophy and spirituality as a creator and someone who is influencing this space and is being influenced by it. I think that the goal of this show is to bring on people who have devoted their life, or at least a significant part of their life, to the um, the quest of gaining knowledge in these things. And doesn't mean that Taoism, or it doesn't mean that Christianity has to do exclusively with sexuality, but it has to do with developing yourself as a human being who is in the search, or in the pursuit of knowledge around this stuff, because you're
Right.
you're devoting yourself to it. And if you wanted to learn how to be a great boxer, you might ask Rocky what he believes in spiritually. It has nothing to do with fighting. It just might have
Sure.
it could unlock something to do with how you would develop your mind to be able to be that person. And that's the same thing with this. Like, we're I'd like to bring examples to multiple people, to as many people as I could reach, of of uh, people who are really going for it.
Mm,
um,
that's beautiful.
Thank you. My computer just told me that my internet was unstable, so hopefully everything is fine.
So far
Um,
I still hear you.
yeah, sweet. Okay, I'm gonna go one last thing,
Okay.
and then shout outs, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so last thing
Okay,
is
sounds good.
yeah, last thing is what it was there a piece of media, music, novels, movies, cartoons, TV shows that had you see yourself as a sexual human being? First thought, like back when I was, some people are back when they were like 6, some people are back when they were 13, 20, in their 20s, something that like ignited this desire of pursuit of sexuality.
Interesting. That's an interesting approach. I find that, me personally, I started the sexual exploration actually very young. I think that my first sexual experience was around 7 years old, with the girl next door who was maybe 2 years older than me. And I remember I got in trouble for it. Like I had written down on a piece of paper that I like had sex with the next door neighbor, and I was so excited. And my dad found it, and I got grounded, and whatever. And um, I remember that it was one of those things that my family, being half Catholic, half Christian, growing up, it was very taboo. And not only was it taboo, but it was also like bad and wrong. You know what I mean? Unless you're married, but bad and wrong. Don't talk about it. Don't do it. And so I realized that I kind of had an apprehension with it. I didn't know how to relate to it. I didn't know how to relate like all through high school, I was single. Like I had love interests, but I was that hopeless romantic, and the idea of sex was like last. Like it wasn't the first thing that I was going for. You know, some men in high school might be the opposite. It might be like the first thing that they want and the only thing that they want. But for some reason, I wasn't that character. You know,
Mhm.
and I don't know what percentage of my upbringing is that, and what percentage of just my natural genetic code, my instinct is that. You know, but um, I do know that over time in my adulthood is when I started to really get curious about, you know, like looking at other people and looking at the cliches in life. Like when you get married, you won't have sex anymore, or don't have kids, because that's when you really don't have sex anymore. And it just made me very curious about all of the stigmas in our culture around sexuality. And thus, Successful Awareness was born, my workshop. And in my workshop, there are certain leadership principles that I talk about and highlight, to learn, so that we can all learn. But mainly it's a space of exploration where there's no wrong or right answer, because your sexual history and experience in life is completely 100% different than mine, and that's 100% different than hers or his or theirs, you know. And so in that, I think that I'm not attached to any one answer. I'm not like steadfast in a belief system, but yeah, I'd say the just general curiosity around it through my adulthood.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that vulnerably. Um,
Yeah, man.
it's not. I wouldn't necessarily tell everyone in my life my personal sexual stories, and there's a certain amount of bravery in our culture to be like, this is when I became that person. There's no like, there's no declaration of manhood or womanhood in our culture.
Yeah, there's no
You
book
just,
written to teach you how to do it.
well, not even like a quinceañera or like becoming a man and like Jewish, like these
Right.
traditional ways of knowing, like, okay, now I'm a man.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that maturity for people sometimes comes from the art that we create, and
Mm.
and as this show is really featured around artists and creators, that
Mm.
we are the people who are going to bring a lot of people to the next stage of their life, from being a child to being a man, or a woman, or whatever, however you want to be identified. But to be
Right.
doing that through the creation and the influence of being an artist, I think is very important.
I
Um,
love that.
I'd like you to talk a bit more deeply about your coaching, and then that will be it, and then we'll conclude. Okay, so
Yeah,
like,
beautiful.
yeah, so go for it. I want to
Um,
know about it.
I mean, as of right now, Successful Awareness is an in-person workshop, so I don't have that running because of quarantine and COVID and the zombie apocalypse that we're living through right now.
Hmm.
But I decided to shift all of my tools and stuff online. So I do a lot of webinar-based trainings and conversations now with people. My next sexuality and romantic and intimacy webinar is going to be August 22nd. So, and this is 2020. So August 22nd, 2020. And I already booked out two from once a month. So September 26th is the next one. October 24th is the following one.
Where is that?
It's going to be
Or
online.
okay,
So there'll be
how do
an
they find it?
Eventbrite, and you can actually go to my website, because I'm actually going to be updating all of that information on my website this week and start promoting and marketing it. My website is visionarylivingcoach.com. So
Okay, I'll put it in the
yeah, beautiful.
description and all that stuff when I post
Yeah,
this.
and sexuality and love and relationships is not the only domain that I do coach and train. You know, I've got one coming called the Best Friend Workshop, where you can take it with your best friend, and get real close and explore friendship, you know, or the boundaries that govern your friendship, right? I've got an accountability program called Fear to Love, 10 weeks long. So there's a lot of things that I'm doing right now, but to keep it focused on, shh, don't tell my mom. I would say August 22nd is the next relationship webinar that I'll be hosting for you guys, if anyone's interested in joining.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. My name is Alexander Scatino. I am the director of the Island of Taboo.com and the host of Shh, Don't Tell My Mom, a web series where we discuss sexuality, the taboo, the fringe cultures, the things that you might want to know about but don't know where to go and find the information. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please like, share, subscribe, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Have fun out there. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Alex. I appreciate you.